Yeah, well, good thing your presentation is short, so we can catch up.
Yes.
Yours is lightning so really.
44 slides?
Oh, really? Updated it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the presentation you approved is not anywhere near the presentation I need to
Okay.
make.
All right.
That's what the presentation in May said. This is the skeleton one that we talked about.
All right. All good. Well, anyway, let's see how it goes.
I can,
We'll probably have to squeeze everybody down to 20 minutes
okay.
because we lost 20 already.
Yeah, because the
25.
opening session ran over by 25 minutes.
All right. I think we have quorum in the room, so I guess the other guys on the outside is not coming in. So anyway, welcome. I'm Raphael Ho from Equinix. I'll be your host for the next exciting Apops 1 session. We have exciting speakers from the Netherlands, and Japan. So we're going to be talking about traffic locality in the Apnic region from Robert Kisteleki and cyber threat analysis from University of Tokyo, Yuki Sekiya-san. But to start off with, we've got Remco van Mook, currently unemployed, to tell us about the $1,000 internet exchange. Thank you.
All right. Do I have my slides? Okay. While we're waiting for my slides to show up, good morning, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that dance performance as much as I did. I'm not going to repeat it. I'm not even going to try. I'm not going to put on the suit. It doesn't work for me. Do I get my slides now? Because Raphael just told me that I need to shorten my presentation by about half. So it's going to be a bit of a tight squeeze. There may be a quiz afterwards, so pay close attention. Is there a magic button for me to push to get my slides? I should have worn the dance costume. Right. Anyone read a good book recently? No? Oh boy. So how about this weather outside then? It's been lovely. It's all eating into your time. I've got 44 slides and now I've got 16 minutes, so just be aware. Yeah. Mr. Chairman of this session, how are we doing?
We're having some technical difficulties and we're rebooting the PC right now. Mac. And magic. Nope, no magic. Maybe you can do a dance or something. Karaoke?
I'm not drunk enough for karaoke, so I'm not gonna do that right now.
We can arrange it. I can go order a couple of beers for you.
Yeah, maybe later.
Can we do another presentation first, or is a fundamental problem? Okay, it's a fun.
Oh dear. So I should have gone for a second coffee, is that what you're saying?
Would you like me to get you a coffee? Okay, I'm going to get a coffee for him.
So this is really awkward. I think I really should have done that dance because it gave me something to do while I'm here on stage. Being, or basically, there we go! Fantastic. Big applause for the technical guys. So, excellent. Let's get this show on the road. I've got 44 slides, so I'm going to be in a bit of a hurry. No introduction for me. This is about $1,000 internet exchanges. Like every presentation on internet exchanges, this will have up and to the right charts. Before I start, this talk is really about setting up not-for-profit, locally run, community-owned exchanges. Applicability for other kind of scenarios where you set up internet exchange may vary. Not pushing any vendor in particular. I don't work for anyone right now even. Nobody's paying me to do this. That's worse. There's a big difference between setting up a new exchange or launching an existing exchange somewhere else. And finally, your mileage may vary. Local regulations, especially here in Asia or in Africa, where I did this presentation last week, can have a very large impact on what you do. Unless you're basing yourself in Florida and you're set up by content providers. And my presentation is gone again. Tell us about Florida. I'm not going to talk about Florida. So you need to have 15, 20 members. Ah, here we go.
Okay.
And your initial revenue is not going to be very high. You're not going to get rich setting up internet exchanges. So paradigm for new IXPs, first you need to grow in order to scale, and once you've grown, then you start scaling to grow. This goes mostly for your technical architecture. Paradigms for helping new IXPs, so if you're sitting on the outside and you want to help people enable new exchanges, what you should really be doing is sponsoring meeting rooms and not big gear. You should help them facilitate their local community building, and you should give them your international contacts if they don't have them. So quickly on building a community, and I could spend a day talking about this, but I have like 6 minutes left, so that's not going to work. There's a couple of really basic guidelines on building a community, and the road to here has been paved with mistakes. You have to be inclusive, you need to be pragmatic on what you do, and you need to try to be neutral. Neutral is very complicated. And I mean, there's plenty of examples of where this has gone wrong, and even the really big exchanges in their startup days have done weird things. I remember the initial guidelines for DKIX were specifically aimed at excluding Deutsche Telekom, and the London Internet Exchange, when it started, specifically excluded content providers. They've all fixed those things by now, of course, but those are easy lessons you can learn from them. Then we go to the setup, the hardware, the 4 S's of IXP: switches, servers, software, and space. Here's the requirements list. So I need 20 gigs of peak traffic, 8 gigs of average traffic, 20 to 30 customer ports. I don't want 10 and 100 meg ports. I'll come to that later. So I need 1 gig ports, multiple 1 gig ports, maybe 10 gig ports. I need a portal, website. I need a quarantine VLAN route server, ArcWatch. And very important, I need a central location with good connectivity options. Don't build a palace in somewhere in the desert and expect that to turn into an internet exchange. And I have seen plans to do exactly that. Doesn't work. So why don't you want 10 and 100 meg ports, even if there's no traffic? The long and short is, don't do it, you will drop traffic. The slightly longer explanation is switches are for forwarding traffic, not storing it, and if there's too much of a difference in port speeds, you will run out of buffers in the switch, and the switch will drop traffic. Same goes for high port utilization. So keep your port speed variance between the highest and the lowest speed port that your customers connect with under 2 orders of magnitude. So here's a bunch of switch options I selected out, just going from the real basic to something that's actually quite advanced. You see the price tags. If you download the presentation, the model names on the right are actually links straight into Amazon where you can order them. So it's point and click, and they'll show up at your door. Same goes for servers. You have a really basic server, and you go up from there, just to show that there's all sorts of granularity in there. Software. You can spend a lot of time building your own software, but again, it's pretty easy to borrow from somebody else. The generous people at INEX, the Internet Exchange in Dublin, have made their software public, and it's highly recommended for everyone to pick up that software. Again, the link is in the presentation, so just download the presentation, click on it, you're there. Final S, space. You need a mutually convenient, existing space with existing connectivity options. You could do it in any other way, but then you're going to spend the best part of 5 years convincing carriers, ISPs, and God knows who else to build the business case, to build out into your new facility. And if the only thing that they will ever do in your facility is connect to the internet exchange, it's got to be a complicated business case. If there's actually money to be made, business to be done, stuff to be sold in that location, that makes that business case all the easier. So you need to have a neutral cable entry, roof rights, and so on for people to connect to that building. The actual IXP requirements in terms of space and power are extremely modest compared to the connecting equipment. As we saw before the break, what's an internet exchange? It's a layer 2 switch with some routers attached to it. And actually the routers that are attaching to that switch are the things that actually eat up space and power. And one important thing to realize is there's no such thing as a free lunch. Data center providers will give you free space and power, but there's always a catch. And you may or may not like it, which comes back to the whole try to be neutral, try to be inclusive. So, a couple business cases. Just for technical infrastructure, this is a quote from one of my favorite movies, Jackie Brown, $500,000 will always be missed. And you can see how that relates to here. So my assumptions for the business cases are no organizational costs are assumed. You're a community run from the ground up, volunteer run exchange. So it's just about the gear and keeping it running. I didn't include any import duties, taxes, VAT, license fees, or whatever kind of local additions you have. It's going to take you 3 years to fill up the ports that you're buying. The power cost I set at $40 cents per kilowatt hour, which is actually pretty high for power cost, but I included all of the data center costs with that. So all the space and power costs are in that power. And I did the revenue projection based on port months, which is a very complicated formula where you sell one port for 1 month, it's a port month. And finally, in terms of pricing, if I sell a 1 gig port on an exchange, I'll charge $50 in setup and $10 a month. And if I sell a 10 gig port, it's $250 setup and $50 a month. Now you might think that this is extremely low. And certainly compared to a lot of internet exchanges around the world, these prices are really low. But then again, keep in mind that this is just for the technical infrastructure. Whatever you want to layer on top, that's up to you. So, setup number 1. The most basic switch with a server next to it and some cabling and some cable management. So I got $350 for the switch. The server is actually more expensive than the switch itself. I get some cabling. There's a fantastic company called Fiber Store based in China. They will give you real good deals on fiber and SFPs and everything. And the total price tag is $952 for something that has 20 customer ports in copper and it uses a total of 67 watts of power. So with that, we're done. I know. So what does the actual business case look like? So I take those numbers, I take the sort of growth rates in number of port months, take the revenue, take the investment cost, take the power cost, and look at what that means for my business case. And you'll see at the end of year 3, the total accumulated margin on that is about $2,300. You're not going to get rich off of this, but it will be sustainable on its own. But this is a really basic setup, so let's try something more expensive. Setup number 2, which actually is a slightly larger switch, which does have 10 gig capabilities. Still the same server, bit more cabling, bit more optics, costing a total of $1,590 using 2 watts of extra power. What does that look like? Actually, that's an even better business proposition because at the end of year 3, you'll have made $3,000. Still not a lot. Go to setup number 3. Setup number 3 has a lot of fiber ports, which is mostly intended for setups where people connect in remotely, so there's no real data center for people to connect to. So you get a switch that's $1,800. You get a slightly more expensive server. Total price tag $4,000. Total power usage 210 watts. Still not very impressive. Which in the end I mean, and I'm still working on those $10 a month, $50 a month pricing. You can still break even and actually make some money out of that setup. And even if I go up all the way to something that's pretty outlandish for a startup, which gives me something like 70 customer ports, got 1 gig and 10 gig options, even 40 gig options. Well, total price like $21,000, which is actually quite a bit of money compared to the first setup. Uses a grand total of an impressive 744 watts of power, which is more than 10 times the cheapest setup. And still, you can see that that actually works out. You do see that the amount of power you're paying has also increased tenfold. So your exposure, your risk of this business case is of course a lot higher because you have your investment and your power costs, and if you don't get any revenue, you'll be $30,000 down the hole. Now, let's compare this to what Raphael called dumpster diving. He suggested I add this. So let's say that you found a big chassis switch in a dumpster in the back of a data center somewhere, together with some servers, and you got it all for free. You got your cabling for free, you got your optics for free. I don't want to go there, but let's assume it was all free. And you get 24 customer ports of 1 gig copper, 20 at single mode fiber, 24 10 gig ports, and 4,500 watts of power, because that switch is actually quite power hungry because it's an old model. So I've got zero investment, I've got a sizable power draw, and I'm selling all my ports. There's something that comes in addition, compared to the other business models, is you have to stop to pay an annual maintenance for firmware upgrades, guarantee, and God knows what else on that switch in order to keep it supported. And if I plug in the numbers I used before, I'm going to be 90,000 down the hole after 3 years. It's not a very good business proposition. And actually, to make it, to make it break even, I need to raise my costs quite substantially. My 1 gig port cost should go up from $10 a month to $50 a month, and my 10 gig port cost should go up from $50 a month to $200 a month. And I just about break even on the whole proposition. I make 8,000 in 3 years' time, which is compared to the exposure, which is investment plus service power cost, is not a very good business case. Then we go to the more traditional ways of, I go to a big vendor, and they will give me a big switch, and it has this number of ports, and I got a big ass server sitting next to it, and it's all really looking big and shiny. And my total price tag is just under $110,000. Power utilization is 2,250 watts. And you see that's even more grim. You end up 150,000 down the hole. So that also doesn't work. And the way to fix that is to get your port cost up to 65 for the 1 gig and 275 for a 10 gig. So you're looking at 5.5, 6 times the price. And this is important, the actual product you're delivering is completely identical. There is no observable difference for people connecting, whether it's box number 4 or this one. So that's about the architecture side. Briefly about figuring out the content side of this. This is what content providers will say to you. Build an internet exchange and we will come. And so you go about and you build an internet exchange, and indeed, they will come back and say, that's lovely. We'll connect to you as long as it's free for us. And of course, getting content providers to come to your internet exchange adds enormous value, but that is at a price. And actually doing that is a separate business case, because typically you're looking at the content provider will require a free IP transit to do a cache fill or whatever. They will want free space and power because they're not paying it anywhere else either. So there's quite a bit of cost associated with getting it set up. The upside, of course, is that your community as a whole gets lower IP transit cost, because there's also, all of a sudden there's a cache and it will offload quite a bit of the traffic. and you get a much improved user experience. But again, this is a business case you should evaluate separately from setting up an internet exchange. Some final remarks. I'm not doing too terribly on time. So you don't need a huge budget to set up an internet exchange. That's the key takeaway. All of the stuff I've been talking about is almost completely irrelevant. Setting up an internet exchange is all about the community. It's about everything but the IXP hardware. You need a solid community, inclusive, pragmatic, neutral. You shouldn't be afraid to upgrade, because if you need to upgrade your hardware, that's usually a sign of success, and that works. And if you want a resilient setup, just build more IXPs. And with that, I am way out of time. If you have any questions or comments, ask me now or see me after the session. I'd like to extend a special thanks to Bijal of EuroIX for giving me the traffic data. And that's it.
All right, thank you. I think we've got time for 2 questions. Anyone? All right, if not, then thank you, Remco. Okay, next up we have Robert from RIPE NCC to talk about traffic locality in the Apnic region. Please give him a warm welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here to talk about the traffic locality as well as some tools that the RIPE NCC is making in order to make your lives easier and in general the internet community's lives easier. What I'm going to talk about is just a bit about RIPE Atlas. It's not a talk about selling RIPE Atlas to you, but it's going to set the stage. Then a bit about the infrastructure geolocation efforts that we do and how to put that all together in order to make traffic locality checks and how to apply that to this particular region. About RIPE Atlas, if you haven't heard about it, it is a measurement network, an active measurement network that is built by the RIPE NCC in order to help people measuring how the internet works, whether the connectivity is there or not, reachability from point A to B, and some low-level network measurements as well. We are using tiny, whiny hardware devices that are hosted by volunteers, like some of you guys already have RIPE Atlas probes. Individuals, institutions, companies, ISPs, IXPs, they just plug it in. It's just a network device that is basically just a small server that joins the network and starts doing measurements that the community wants it to do. If you run such a network and such a node in the network, then you contribute to the overall capacity, so you increase the capacity of the system, and in return, you can also do your own measurements from the whole network. So you can use anyone's probes, which we will see is sometimes quite handy. We do support low-level network measurements, so such as ping and traceroute and DNS queries. Somewhat high-level TNS queries, so you can go to server and say, hey, what's your certificate, which is a very interesting question in some cases, and NTP measurements. We also introduced HTTP measurements, but that's a very restricted feature. It can only go to certain destinations, so I'm not going to talk about much about it. We are hugely Euro-biased. That was the design, so something like 2/3 of the probes are in Europe. But we have more and more probes in this region as well, which is going to be highly useful as the locality example will show. At the moment, we have roughly 8,600 probes up and running at the same time. So right now, it's holding about 8,600, and more than 8,000 measurements are running all the time. So this is where they are. Physically, we always ask the host of such a probe to tell us where the probe is geographically. So you can see that the worldwide deployment is quite good, and also in this region we have quite a good presence. We can always increase it, and it's always more handy to have more probes. So if you feel like you want to join this effort, by all means, please do. Apnic is itself an ambassador, so you can get probes from them, and there are other people in the community who can help you with that. Now, a highly related project is what we call Open IP Map, and the name is really suggestive. We want to be open about code and data that we do, and we want to apply that to the IP space, and we want to map things. So basically, just like OpenStreetMap, this is an analogy on that one. We would like to build a geolocation database focusing on infrastructure IPs. We don't want to deal with where the networks are in terms of home users, where they are in which city and which street they are. We really, really want to focus on the infrastructure. And you can already see how that's going to become quite interesting when we want to see how the traffic flows. If it happens that as a byproduct we get geolocation for eyeballs, that's also okay, but that's not the goal. This is a prototype. It has bugs in it. It has wrong data in it, but you can all contribute to it on the code level and on the data level so we can improve it better. As I said, the service itself is a prototype, and what we want to do is we want to collect multiple sources of information about where the infrastructure is. So one of those is IXP peering lands. IXPs are usually in a very well-defined spot. For example, M6 is in Amsterdam, so all the packets that go through the M6 peering LAN are highly likely going through Amsterdam. There are always exceptions, but there's a rule of thumb. We can say that if the path hits the peering LAN of M6, then it was in Amsterdam. We're also harvesting reverse DNS. Most of you are running networks, most of you name your routers, and if I look up an IP address, I get a name back. Sometimes that's wrong, but in most cases that actually is suggestive about where that particular interface is physically. So most ISPs put in, for example, city names or POP names or something like that. We also want to rely on all the community to say, where is this particular hop? So if you happen to be an operator of a particular network, you can tell the system that I happen to know that this prefix or this particular IP is in whichever city. If we have known locations, and we do have them because RIPE Atlas is deployed and we know where those probes are, we can also triangulate. So anything that's, for example, 1 millisecond away from Amsterdam is in Amsterdam for particular purposes. And we also have iterative approaches, so if the next hop is 1 millisecond away from me, and I know where I am, then the next hop is also close to me. Point of order, at the moment we are aiming for city level accuracy, but technically we could do POP level, we could do street level. It's just for privacy reasons, it's better to say that the packets went through a city than to say it went through my home. That's not good. Okay, so why are we doing this? And now it becomes interesting. We are doing this because we had a couple of questions at the RIPE NCC that we didn't have the answers for. One of them was, if there is a disaster, if there is an outage, what kind of infrastructure was hit by this? And the particular example that we had was back in the day, the Hurricane Sandy that hit New York. And we wanted to look at, okay, how did the traffic change? Did it shift through, did it go through Miami instead? Did it go to the north? Did it travel the other way around the world or so? But we didn't have an answer because we didn't know what kind of traffic we are looking for. We didn't know what infrastructure was hit by this. So if there was a service that tells us that what this particular infrastructure is in New York, then we know where to focus, then we know where to look. Another use case is to know how the packets actually fly geographically. And you can see that this is going to very be useful for the traffic locality checks that I'm going to explain later on. But also, it is not necessarily a technical term, but the hairpinning. So if packets go through a nice path that you can say, oh, that's reasonable that they go to the right, and then suddenly they go up and down again, back to the same spot, and they go further away, you can reasonably say that that's just probably not what should happen, so we could optimize that hairpin out of the path if we know about it, but for that, you need to know where the packets go. So this whole OpenIP thing is now part of RIPE Atlas. If you run a traceroute measurements in RIPE Atlas, then one of the results that you can see is basically such a visualization. It shows you all the sources, laser, yeah, all the probes, all the destinations, and the path that we think that the traceroute actually took. Of course, as I said, it might have geolocation problems in it, but generally it gives you a good idea. Okay, so if we put that together, RIPE Atlas and the OpenIP map, then we can do something useful, and this is what we do for locality checks. What we do here is, for a particular region that we want to focus on, or country, or ISP, you define that, but most of the time we apply that to countries. We select a subset of probes. there is no point in taking all the probes, for example, in a big AS. In Germany, Deutsche Telekom has hundreds of probes in their network. There's no good reason to select all of them because they probably share faith in this sense. But we select a subset of them. Then we take all of these probes and execute a full mesh measurement. So all probes will trace route to all other probes. When this happens, we take all the hops that all the trace routes took and then try to map those using OpenIPMap to geography and then see which of the paths actually stayed in that particular country or region and which didn't. Obviously, we can only positively confirm out of the country passes, because if we don't know where all the hops are, then we don't know if the path left the country, but we can have positive confirmation that something left the country. So anytime you see an observation that says, nope, that traffic never left the country, is more like a suggestion. If you see that a particular path left the country, that's more of a signal that you have to look at. So once we have all this data, then we put this on the map, because everyone likes maps and it's very visual. We also try to build matrices with color-coded cells so that you can actually see, oh, that subset of probes has a problem in this sense or not. And we can also, if we have knowledge, we can also highlight IXPs or other known locations. So you can just say, yep, those paths actually went through my local IXP, which is a good thing or a bad thing, you decide. So if we put all this together and apply that to this region, we selected 4 countries, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, to check how this actually looks like. And we also tried to merge all those countries and say, if we want to send traffic from all the probes to all the probes, do they actually leave these 4 countries? So do they go to a 5th country, for example, to travel and then come back? You can see that various countries have different number of probes. So here, again, if you can run a RIPE-ATLAS probe, then you can help this effort as well, and that ultimately helps optimizing the traffic for the whole country. The measurements were taken roughly at the same time, so the numbers don't necessarily add up to exactly. That's not the bug, that's the feature. So naively, one would say that if I have probes in Indonesia and they travel to other Indonesian destinations, then the traffic should stay in Indonesia. And most of the time, that's true, so we can look at particular examples. This is the matrix of in-country or out-of-country, particularly for Indonesia. Let me explain the color codes. The color codes, you can see that green and blue don't appear because we didn't define IXPs, so if we did, then some of the cells would be either green or blue. But yellow and red do. So yellow means that according to our measurements, the traffic actually stayed in the country. Red means that it took a trip outside of the country and then came back. On the y-axis, we see sources. On the x-axis, we see destinations. So for example, this is an ASN, and if from this ASN we try to measure to that ASN, then we hit at least one hop which is outside of the country. So this is basically going to be the explanation for all of the matrices that I'm going to show. So I also have a map, which I can show to you, and it will, but what we can observe immediately from this is that most of the traffic actually stays local. We did not detect the packets going out of the country. There are exceptions, of course, and in particular, this is an AS that you can look up, and that more often than not actually goes out from the country, and most of the time it goes to Hong Kong or Singapore. Now, I'm not trying to make a value judgment here, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. That's really up to you. It might be entirely intentional because you have the best transit provider or your favorite peer, or you want to peer at Hong Kong although you are in Indonesia. That's perfectly fine. This is an indication of what is measurable. Whether this is good or bad, that's really up to you. Later on, I will show a slide which will have all the links to all these matrices, so you can go there and interact with the tool. If you hover over such a cell, it will tell you the actual trace route and the localities of the hops that we think we detected. So you can just check yourself. If you find your own AS in this matrix, and I hope you do because that means you have probes, you can check whether your traffic stood local or not. So on the map, this is still Indonesia. As I said, some traffic goes to Hong Kong. But considering the fact that Indonesia is about 17, 18,000 islands, connectivity is amazingly good and stays within the country as far as we can see. In IPv6, excuse for the map, this should go towards the right preferably, but due to limitations, unfortunately the US is always west to the country. This is on IPv6, and most likely one of the probes actually has a hurricane electric tunnel which goes to California, and then the packet comes back. Okay, Malaysia. We have way less probes in Malaysia, unfortunately, so if you're from Malaysia and you're willing to host a probe, please step up and approach some of the ambassadors. But what we do see is that less probes, but more local connectivity. It's probably also due to the fact that Malaysia is way more centralized, at least geographically, and that just makes sense. Some packets do go via Singapore, but that's close by. It's, as I said, it's probably very intentional. It's really up to the operators to say whether that's true or not. Unfortunately, we don't have IPv6 probes in Malaysia. This is the same thing on the map. Not surprisingly, Kuala Lumpur has the most probes, and then some of the packets actually go to Singapore and back. Okay, Philippines. Well, Philippines is a different game. We know that it's really difficult to maintain cabling between countries and also within the country. As far as I'm aware, the major undersea cables basically go around the Philippines, so it's not surprising that the Philippines have a somewhat different outcome here. But what's more surprising is the around the world packets. There are actually packets, if you want to send them from the Philippines to the Philippines, they actually go to the US and then to the UK and down to Paris and down to Frankfurt, and from Frankfurt they come back. They really travel around the world. Now you can imagine that from a user experience point of view, that's really not what you want. So if at all possible, I encourage you to look at why that is and how you can solve that. And there are a number of ways of solving that, of course. Some other packets go to the US and then come back. Hong Kong, Japan, Tokyo is one of the exchanges that is hit more often than not. And on IPv6, that's a very interesting one. We have observed at least one instance when the packets go down to Perth and they come back. Is that intentional or not? We don't know. But this is a very good example of the so-called hairpinning, right? You most likely don't want this, okay? And obviously this shows that the packets go all the way. You can see the Europe path over there. Okay, Singapore. Now Singapore is basically, from our concept, it's a city. We don't make a differentiation between this region or that region of Singapore because we do city level things. So it's very indicative of where the packets actually live the country or city in this case. This is also one of the examples where I know that this is wrong. This is just misgeolocated, so this part actually does not leave Singapore as far as we know. It's just a wrong geolocation in our database. But otherwise, you can really observe that most of the traffic stays local. At least most of the packets don't leave Singapore. Some of them do. Some of them go to Hong Kong. Some of them go to Tokyo. But as I said, that might be perfectly okay. It might be intentional. It's really up to you to decide whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Oops. So this is the map version of what we saw in Singapore. This is the V6 packet going to Hong Kong and back, and most of these lines are artificial, so you can ignore them. So now if we combine all of these countries, so the 4 countries together, meaning we select all the probe that we selected for the individual countries, and now we ask them to measure towards each other, all of them combined. It's reasonable to say that, yeah, we'll see whatever we saw in individual countries because that's just a subset of the measurements that we do. But we also see that from Singapore to Malaysia, something might happen, or from Indonesia to Philippines. So this is basically the summary of what we see, and as I said, all the details are online. You can actually look at that. Some traffic asymmetry can be seen, and way more paths actually go via Europe and Australia, and this is the summary of it. Not surprisingly, lots of connectivity here. Some of the packets go to the US. We have the around the world packets as well. And this is the V6 version of the graph. Obviously, it's a bit smaller. But something that's particularly interesting, and I haven't looked at what that path is, but there is at least one or maybe a couple of instances where we see packets going to Perth, and then this is probably Sydney, and then to Japan, and then coming back to the region. Again, routing policies, peering arrangements, you name them. This might be okay, might not, but there is something you can do about it. And the question is, what can you do about it? So I really encourage you, and this is the next slide, oops, next slide actually has all the links. So what's that? The first one is for Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and Singapore, and then the fifth one is the combined one. If you go there, if you go to these links, you will see all the matrices, all the maps, and you can interact with the tool. So I encourage you to go there if you're really interested in the details. This link, unfortunately, on the PDF is broken. You have to assemble the two lines. But coming back, what can you do about it? If you see that from your AS to your neighboring AS, the path is not what you think it should be, and what we can do is just show you. We cannot help you fixing it. Then you can do something about it. For example, you can talk to your upstreams. You can make peering arrangements. You can talk to your neighbor and say, well, this is no good. You need to change your settings. And then that might just be enough to actually fix these things if you consider them to be a problem. If you don't have a probe in your ASN, then please apply for one, because the next time we run this, and we run these continuously, you will also be included in this, therefore giving you more information. And if you see that, yeah, that geolocation is obviously wrong, I know better, then you can actually go to the tool and fix that. You can suggest an improved geolocation. So as I said, everything is online. You can go there and you can interact with the tool. It's nice, you can hover over cells and it will give you more information. And keep in mind, this is prototype code, prototype data, so we do have mistakes. We know that not everything is perfect. And with that, if you have any questions, you can ask now, or I'm going to be around for the next 2-3 days, so please approach me and I can help you with this. Thank you.
Any questions? I see Mr. Houston.
Thank you. From what I understand of this, you're kind of relying on operators to use public addresses to address their infrastructure. Now I remember, because I'm old, numbering every single interface and every single loopback and every single whatever it was on the router with a public address. But that was then. And these days addresses cost. And if I was rolling out a network today, I'd roll it out on Net 10. Because quite frankly, I don't need unique addresses for my infrastructure. To what extent is this relying on an old practice of using public unique addresses for infrastructure, and to what extent it's threatened by, if you will, people like me who roll stuff out in Net 10?
Well, the Net 10 addresses should not show up in public trace routes, right?
Well, the whole thing is infrastructure shouldn't show up, because infrastructure isn't really an addressed
but
thing.
It does, right?
Right, but
so
the question is that a quaint historical practice that's dying out, or do folk just consume public addresses for infrastructure because that's what the book says?
I think that it's the second one of those. But you know, even with that said, we know that, for example, the naming schemes and so on are not necessarily up to date. We have our own issues with this thing, but it's meant to be an indicator of how things work. And if you're using private addresses, if you're using MPLS, if you're using other kind of technologies that obscure this, we wouldn't know. We do see packets that suddenly disappear in the US and then they appear somewhere else. Probably an MPLS tunnel or some kind of other tunnel. So, having the limitations is just a fact of life. I personally couldn't answer your question about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing to use private addresses. That's really up to the operators to say.
I suppose my question was, to what extent do you actually see that infrastructure changing? Because you're doing trace routes.
Yeah.
You're getting the infrastructure to respond. Have you looked at any trends in terms of use of private addresses?
Well, one of the benefits that we have here is that we can observe things as they change over time. So I would be very happy to come back to you and report back a year later.
Fair enough, thanks.
Well, hang on, not quite yet. Unless you're giving Jeff a round of applause, which I think we all should. But any other questions? I got a question. Do you have any right probes on you?
I personally don't, but we have ambassadors in the room. Can I please ask the ambassadors to stand up, please, so that anyone who is interested, there's at least one. I know Apnic staff as such is an ambassador. So, if you know these people, or if you don't know them, you know Apnic staff, you can approach them and say, I would like to have one. They will know what to do.
Do you want to say a few words about the ambassador program and where you need the probe most?
Okay. Basically, as I explained, RIPE Atlas benefits from the expansion. So we always need more probes in the networks that we don't have presence, because that gives more information, not to us, but back to the community mostly. So if you happen to be in a region where we are sparse on probes, then you can step up and say, I know the people there, I know how to deploy probes, I know who to talk to, I know who are the usual suspects in that region. Basically stepping up as an ambassador, we will give you probes, and your only task is to approach people in your own region and say, I know you want one, and explain why is that good for you, for the community, for the local region, and so on and so forth.
Any specific countries that you would like to ask?
As you could see, Malaysia is pretty sparse in this particular region, and I know that some of the smaller countries here could do with more probes, yes.
Okay, well, the map is on atlas.ripe.net, so you can go take a look at it. With that, thank you very much, Robert.
Thank you.
And I would like to invite my next, we have another question.
Yep. No, it's just a comment, cover Azure RIPE and CC. I just wanted to mention, because of the ambassador program that popped up, we have a very nice MOU with Apnic about all the measurement activities and some other activities. So actually I encourage you to either talk to us or Apnic, it really doesn't matter, and we with Apnic staff, we are here to help. It's not only about the ambassador program or probes, you can also, if you have questions or want to host in RIPE Atlas Anchor, which are the bigger boxes for data centers, or a K-root instance for a DNS root server, both of the RIRs we can help you.
Okay. Thank you. And with that, I'd like to invite Sekiya-san. Thank you. And he's going to be telling us about cyber threat analysis. Thank you. Please give him a warm welcome.
So hello, I'm Yuji Sekiya from the University of Tokyo. So actually, I'm a researcher of the university and the operator of the academic network in Japan. So today I would like to introduce our research result. It is the cyber security detection, analysis, and defense system. So it developed in NECOMA project. So NECOMA project is a joint research with JP EU organizations. So we are researching the many kinds of the security threat and defense systems. How can I go to the next slide? This one? Yeah, today especially I would like to introduce the MATATABI system. This is a part of the NECOMA project, and we develop MATATABI system, it is a core part of the NECOMA system. This is this aim to keep the network security and forensics for analysis cyber securities. So as you know, nowadays the cyber security is one of the most important issues in the network operation. So in order to detect and prevent cyber attacks in advance is very important. So in order to achieve these defenses, so the operator should collect many kinds of logs from routers, firewalls, IDS, servers, and user devices. And of course, so the operator should collect information regarding the security from the, some kind of the external sources, such as a website. This is a vulnerability information or trend of the current attacks. So the collecting the logs from devices and collecting the information from the external sources are very important. So this is the typical pipeline of the security processing, some kind of the issues. So if something wrong happen, such as intrusion or denial of services or hijacking, the operators have to try to collect the logs from the devices or external sources and try to find the evidence of the attacks and keep the forensics. So in usual case, the operator log into each devices in order to collect the logs, and so to collect the logs from the routers, customer devices, or firewalls, or blah, blah, blah. So that operator try to find the suspicious and related logs of each attacks. So as a result, it is very inconvenient make analysis and forensics. It is very inconvenient, and the login to each devices makes the analysis and the forensics too slow. So we developed that system for the collecting various kind of the logs from the devices and information from the external sources. And so it makes easy for operators to analysis and find suspicious or some kind of the evidence of the attack logs easily. So this is a MATATABI system. This is the system, MATATABI system currently we are operating. So that we collect many kinds of from the switches, routers, and some kind of external sources from the phishing site or external DB or user emails detected by spam or firewalls. So we are collecting many kinds of logs into the one systems and provide the analysis platform. So as a proof of concept, so that this system is installed in our university and one of the academic network called WIDE project. So this system collects many kinds of the data shown in the previous figure. And so that some data from some data from devices and some data from the external sources are integrated, and so the operator can analyze various data by a uniform way. So as a proof of the concept, we operate the system since 2013, so 2 years ago. And currently it has collected over 30 terabyte logs, so it is the compressed size. And so that we are using this system for the daily operation and the security forensics. Yeah, and so that maybe there is a similar systems by open sources or a dedicated system is used in your organizations. However, in our systems, MATATABI is developed to achieve these 4 points. One is forensics, the second is scalability, and the third is real-time analysis. The fourth is for the uniform programmability. Yeah, the advantages of our system is the most special advantages of our system is a uniform programmability. So yeah, many various logs from various devices have different format, and so the different granularity and different information. So however, so that we designed the format of the stored data set, so specialized for security analysis. So all data are converted to for our MATATABI format and stored into our file system. So the operator can use simple notation like a similar SQL notation to find suspicious logs and analyze the logs. So anyway, so I'll show the examples later. So, and this is an overview of the diagram of MATATABI system. It is developed using several open source software, such as Apache Hadoop, and Apache Hive, and Apache Mahout, and Facebook Prest. So we integrated these softwares and specialized for security analysis and forensics. So we call it is MATATABI system. So this is the point is basically it is built on the Hadoop system and so that is distributed processing. And so that for the user interfaces, we use Hive and Apache Hive and Facebook Prest for the providing the SQL-like interface to the operators. Yeah, actually, so that this is the list of the open source software we are using. So that we are integrated this kind of software as a one system for the specialized for the security forensics. And so that we are provided so that this system as open source in this GitHub. Yeah, actually, so that I also skip the details of our system. However, so that this is basically so the same as a Hadoop, and so some kind of the techniques for the analysis, specialized for the security analysis will be introduced. However, so basically so the same as a Hadoop. Yeah, currently so we are using the MATATABI system for the daily analysis. This is a list of the daily analysis we are currently running. So Deus DGA detector, this is one of the botnet, and the UDP fragment attack or phishing attack, NTP amplifier attack, DNS amplifier attack, or some kind of the attack. So we are collecting the daily logs, and so we are running the script to the analysis, some kind of the daily attacks. Okay, so I'll show some example of the analyze security threat using the MATATABI system. This is the very simplest one. So this is the first example. So if we want to detect the NTP amplification attacks, this is very simple because the NTP uses NTP protocol uses UDP and the port number is 123. And so maybe a packet size is 468 because the monolist attack is full of the UDP size. So the 468 is the maximum UDP content size, excluding the IP header and UDP header. So we can find the attack packet using such kind of notation. So this is the notation of the SQL-like. So just typing this kind of the notation, we can find the attack. This is the screenshot, and we can find some kind of the attacks, so the addresses to our site. So this is one simple example. And so this is the example two. So the detecting the DNS amplifier possible attacks. So this is the method to find the unusual DNS queries sent to our authoritative DNS servers. So usually, the authoritative DNS servers are used by recursive servers, not directly by users. So end user or end devices doesn't send DNS query directly to the authoritative DNS servers. However, there is some strange queries. It is have the DNS QR bit, and so RD bit is enabled so that this is some strange queries to our authoritative servers, which the query has the RD bit. So this is very unusual query. So we can find this kind of the unusual queries typing this kind of the notation. So this is the SQL-like notation, and so we can find such kind of the malicious behavior just typing this kind of the notation. And so Example 3, this is also related to DNS servers. It is not authoritative servers, just the attacks to the resolver servers, recursive servers. So that if the usual case, the number of the DNS query of answer maybe nearly equal to the number of the question queries. However, if the number of the DNS query of answer is larger than number of the DNS query of the question, so it is maybe be unusual. It may be unusual. So why our DNS server receives more answers than questions we send. This is the basic principle. So we can find the unusual queries to our recursive servers just typing this kind of the notation. This is the example. And I will show the last example. This is relating to the botnet. So one of the botnets, the queries, the DGA query to DNS servers. This is one of the points we can find this botnet in our network. So the query logs from DNS servers are useful to the detecting the infected host. And SFlow and NetFlow logs are useful for the analysis the behaviors of the infected host. So this is an example of the combination analysis of using of the DNS queries and NetFlow logs. So this is the combination DNS and the NetFlow, and so that we can show the we can find some malicious force which sends the unusual query to the DNS servers, and so that we can find the behaviors of the infected host. So this is the screenshot, and so that this is the result of the example. So some of the IPv6 addresses are shown in this, so that detecting DJ queries. And so some of the infected hosts, which has these IPv6 addresses and IPv4 addresses, has sent such kind of the unusual queries to the DNS servers. This is one of the communication with the botnet C&C servers and hosts. So actually, this is the live demonstration. So such kind of the analysis will be done in MATATABI system, and so that this is the result of the botnet detection. Yeah, so, and so this is one of the visualization of the combination with DNS query log and so the NetFlow logs. We can find some malicious host by DNS queries, which sending the malicious DGA query to the DNS servers. And we can find 162 queries, unusual queries, and this host communicate to the other side to this other addresses. This is a combination of the DNS queries and NetFlow. Okay, so as I shown, this is summary. MATATABI system. We developed a MATATABI system for the security analysis and for security forensics. So it is one of the part of NECOMA project, and so we also developed the defense system, such as filtering mechanism at internet exchange. However, I will keep the details. So especially for the MATATABI, this is the analysis system for the various logs. So we want to. Today I introduced this system so that this is actually we developed for the research purposes. However, currently we are using in actual network for the detecting daily threat. So we want to move forward this system for the prototype to the actual product. Current, not the prototype, we want to move forward this software to the daily operational product. So we want to move forward so that if you are interested in this system, please visit our site or contact me So we are very appreciate your interest and your help. So thank you for the attention, your attention.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? If not, then thank you very much for your presentation. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank all our speakers for presenting and spending time to come and talk to all of us. So before we head out, a couple of announcements. Lunch is served at the Asia restaurant, unless your badge has a green line on the bottom that says newcomer. We all have a newcomer reception set up in Mutiara room, Mutiara 2, on level 2, so just walk around the atrium, and it's on the other side. And there's a session at 12:30 as well for an introduction to policy SIG, and that's in Bahasa for the Indonesian people, and it will be running at the Lobo restaurant on the lobby level. So that's it. Thank you very much. Enjoy your lunch.
Sorry, a quick announcement in Bahasa Indonesia, as Rafael already said. So, kita akan ada session policy introduction di Lobo cellar room di lantai 1. Jadi akan disajikan dalam bahasa Indonesia yang nanti akan menjelaskan bagaimana proses pembentukan policy di Apnic. Jadi diharapkan Bapak Ibu sekalian yang khususnya dari Indonesia untuk bisa sama-sama join pada acara tersebut di lantai 1 di bawah. Terima kasih, ketemu dengan saya di sana. Terima kasih. Thanks, Rafael.